Actually, he was thinking it was rather a bore that the prince had sent for him when he had intended on returning to his house in Berkeley Square to change for his dinner engagement with Lady Abbot. She had commanded his attention last night at Devonshire House, because the gown she wore was so transparent that when she entered the room he had, for one startled moment, thought that she was completely naked. He must have met Lady Abbot on a number of previous occasions, but he had never before noticed that her figure was outstanding, until the transparency of her gown had been brought so forcibly to his notice. It was then that he decided she was worth more than a casual glance, and there was no doubt that the lady in question was only too willing. Her dark hair and slanting green eyes reminded him of a panther, and he found when he talked with her in the garden that she could flirt provocatively and with the land of sophistication that he always found amusing. Like the prince, the Marquis preferred women who were well versed in the art of love and the ways of the world. Although anxious mothers scuttled their offspring away at his approach, as if even by looking at him they might become contaminated, young girls, in fact, were perfectly safe from him. The Marquis was not even aware of their existence. When his relatives were brave enough occasionally to suggest to him that it was time he married and had an heir, he set them down abruptly. Equally, he thought to himself that if he did marry, it would have to be a widow who understood the social world in which he moved and, what was more important, understood his need to be constantly amused and entertained. There was nothing the Marquis dreaded more than boredom, and he took care that he was seldom in either the company or the situation where he might conceivably be bored even for a few minutes. When he was racing, boxing, watching a mill or hunting, the activity stimulated him. Similarly, he found himself entertained when the pursuit of some attractive prey was difficult or prolonged. The trouble where women were concerned was that they fell far too easily into his arms, almost before he held them out. Although he looked forward to spending the evening with Lady Abbot, he had the uncomfortable feeling that it would end predictably like every other evening, when he found a woman desirable, and she capitulated all too soon. He drew up outside the fine Corinthian portico added to Carlton House by Henry Holland. The house was still far from finished, but was already acclaimed as a triumphant success by those who supported the prince, and stigmatized as a costly failure by those who did not. It was well known that the prince's debts were rising towards £500,000, a great deal of which had been incurred in rebuilding and redecorating the sumptuous palace, which, it had been averred, had no spot without some finery upon it. Gold upon gold. Others said openly that it was vulgar in its opulence. The Marquis appreciated that the prince had outstandingly good taste, and although His Royal Highness spent a great deal of money he did not possess, he was quite certain that posterity would believe it to be justified. As he walked into the splendid hall, decorated with Ionic columns of brown sienna marble, which led to an octagon and graceful double staircase, he thought, as he had thought before, that the prince possessed an artistic sense for which the public never gave him credit. Because the prince had a cosmopolitan mind and education, he had sent his friends and agents to France, whenever the exigencies of the Revolution and subsequent wars allowed it, to buy furniture and objets d'art. They had brought back paintings, clocks, looking-glasses, bronzes, Sèvres china, and tapestries, and now, at last, they had a setting worthy of them. As the Marquis walked up the stairs without hurrying, he knew that with the help of the salesrooms and dealers in London, the prince had accumulated the most comprehensive collection of works of art ever assembled by an Englishman, let alone by a future monarch. The Marquis had, in fact, helped to find and improve the collection with paintings by Peter Greuze, Lénard, and Claude, which the prince had hung in his new rooms in a manner that commended itself to any art lover. The extraordinary thing was that amongst the men with whom the prince surrounded himself, many of whom were very intelligent, few had the same appreciation of art as the Marquis. This was because, in his own houses, he had inherited paintings and treasures that compared very favourably with those that the prince was accumulating. He was also aware that the Queen had said angrily, "The Marquis of Fane encourages George to spend money simply by flaunting his own possessions in front of him."